Rabbi Judy Ginsburgh will be officiating at this time, and the Kriya ceremony was performed before the family entered the chapel.
Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. I lift my eyes up to the mountains, for this is where I find my strength. I'd like to start by telling you a story. I asked a leaf on a tree whether it was frightened because it would soon be autumn and the leaves would be falling to the ground. The leaf told me, no. During the whole spring and summer, I was completely alive. I worked hard to help nourish the tree, and now much of me is in the tree. I am not limited by this form. I am also the whole tree, and when I go back to the soil, I will continue to nourish the tree. So I don't worry at all. As I leave this branch and float to the ground, I will wave to the tree and tell her, I will see you again very soon. Later that day, there was a wind blowing, and after a while, I saw the leaf leave the branch and float down to the soil, dancing joyfully, because as it floated, it saw itself already there in the tree. It was so happy. I nodded my head, and I knew that I had a lot to learn from that leaf. Just as that little leaf was part of the tree, our loved ones live on through us, those they have left behind. They are part of us, and we are part of them, and their memories will always be a blessing. Mildred Barken Ginsburgh was born on February 6, 1924. She was the only child of Morris and Ida Barken. Millie always wanted a big family, and she got one. She had 4 children, Steve, Jim, Robbie, and Ida. Robbie known as Bob now, Ida known as Joey. She had 6 grandchildren, Adam, Mitchell, Justin, Rachel, Aaron, and Jonathan. And she had 10 great grandchildren, Maddie, Marley, Evelyn, Ellie, Cameron, Maggie, Hallie, Sadie, Annie, and Weston. She loved her family, and they loved her too. Millie was always taken care of, first by her loving parents, then by her husband Erwin, who adored her. For the past several years, Joey and Jeff and a list of caregivers have taken care of Millie's every need. God bless them all. Millie was determined and sometimes stubborn. She loved her newcomers group and loved planning events for them and others. She loved dressing up and going out. She loved pretty things, and she liked for things to be a certain way. And she loved her Chicago Cubs. Joey, we are all so thankful and grateful to you for all the care you gave to Mom. We know it wasn't easy and many sacrifices were made, but you were the one who was always there for her. You were her heart, and she will always be in all of our hearts. We all have so many wonderful Millie memories, and I hope that when we meet for lunch and future days and times, we will continue to share those Millie memories, especially with her great-grandchildren who are young, and we hope that the four of you back there remember her, and through the stories, you will get to know her better. We're so glad you're here. At this time, I'd like to call on Steve and Alice to say something.
I think there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be repeated today. As you already know, my mom was a great Cubs fan, and she loved baseball. So I'm going to summarize how my mother's life touched all four bases. So here goes. At first base are some of the newsworthy events she experienced, including Prohibition, the Depression, World War II, presidential assassination. It's not sounding good so far. Men on the Moon, home computers, and the Cubs World Series victory, the biggest, of course. At second base are the things she did, including dancer, pianist, store buyer, charity groups leader, matzo ball maker, all hard, medium, and soft, whatever your choice. Marrying my father and then creating children. I and my siblings, thank God for this. And lots of laughing. That's how I would characterize my mom. At third base is helping others by mainly talking and listening, whether it's on the phone, kitchen table, jam-packed holiday dinners, or just going for what she called coffee and. She helped a lot of people just by meeting her and knowing her. And finally, home plate, where family was number one, including 4 children, 6 grandchildren, and a softball team of great-grandchildren, and innumerable friends plus extended family. She brought family together for special occasions with food. Don't forget the sweet and sour meatballs, and eventually for cleaning all those dishes. Most recently, her backyard was the setting for Alice and my 50-plus year vow renewal ceremony. So now my mom has taken her best swings, and her life was a home run. We think she batted 1,000.
Millie Ginsburgh will always be my second mother. She was and will continue to be a force to be reckoned with. Millie taught me a great many important things which prepared me for living life to the fullest. First and foremost, she taught me about love for family. As we have heard, family always held the greatest overriding importance for Millie because she had been an only child. And she created a marvelous, closely bonded family with many Ginsburg stories and traditions and her very presence. Her insistence and devotion to family shall continue to be unrivaled. Her greatest joy was her now extensive family, and whenever the Cubs won a game, that made her day. 3 lessons will always be associated with Mom for me. First, the importance of taking an interest in and listening to others, and knowing that it is how you make others feel which they will remember. Next, how to entertain without becoming frazzled and perhaps taking shortcuts while making the event seem like you had put every effort into it. Here's an example. one of Steve's closest high school friends was being married 2 weeks before we got married, and he stood up at our wedding, and Millie and I decided to give a bridal shower for his bride. So we did it on a very short time frame, and we didn't know hardly any of the women who came because the list had been compiled by the bride's mother and her future mother-in-law. So Millie made a rice dish. She made rice-a-roni. She laced it with pimentos and black olives and mushrooms, and these ladies raved about it. They all wanted the recipe, and without batting an eye, Millie recited the directions off the rice-a-roni box. Well, you probably know that Millie and Irwin made it possible for me to attend law school because I lived under their roof for 2 years while Steve was in the Navy. You may not know, it was actually Millie's idea that I enroll in law school. So, as I told Millie when we were last in California, with my husband of almost 53 years and my career, I owe the total of my adult life to Millie Ginsburgh. Mom has always and will continue to walk with me every day. Her force will continue with all of us. And I will sign off the way Millie ended our numerous phone calls. I love you back.
There are a few others in the family who wish to speak. First, Justin, then Bob, and then Joey.
So I'm Jim's son, who unfortunately could not be here today, but I'll be speaking on behalf of that part of the Ginsburgh clan. And I'll start by telling a story. About 20 years ago, my brother and I were actually giving Millie and Irwin our car. I was moving to New York City, did not need a car, and my dad thought that our car would be safer and more reliable than the beater that Irwin was still keeping around. So I dropped my brother off in San Francisco. I drove to Los Angeles, and it was actually really bad timing. Millie was in the hospital. She was at Cedars-Sinai, and that was the first place I went when I went to LA. And she was actually in really bad shape. I was surprised what condition she was in, and I actually left thinking I would never see her again. And that was 20 years ago. But in hindsight, I should have never underestimated Millie's ability to live life to her fullest and live as long as humanly possible. What she had been through in her life really prepared her for taking on the challenges of aging and taking them on with a joie de vivre. She was born in 1924, or as she liked to say, 1926. As a young child, she was actually adopted by family friends when her father died and her mom could no longer take care of her. She lived through the Great Depression. She had a boyfriend, who later was my grandfather, who was at sea in the South Pacific, and his ship was actually kamikaze by the Japanese. She had a long-distance relationship with my grandfather when that involved a 24-hour train ride or a letter in the mail that could take 5 days to get to New York City. There was no FaceTime for the younger folks in the crowd. She raised 4 kids over a period of 30 years, which could not have been easy with my grandfather working many days in Indiana from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. And for the past 20 years, we all know she had various health challenges, typical of that age, but they never dampened her spirit and will to live life to the fullest. She never slowed down, becoming a tech-enabled 90-year-old, sending emails, being on Facebook, and traveling the United States to see her growing brood of great-grandkids. I was fortunate enough to visit LA back in May. As usual, Millie was bursting with joy to see family and sharing her stories, her wisdom, and her opinions with aplomb. When I was leaving, it felt like it might be the last time I would see her, but unlike the time I saw her 20 years ago, I wasn't filled with sadness. I was grateful for the past 20 years, for how much she lived life to the fullest, despite probably being the most challenging 20 years of her life. I was grateful that she got to be part of our daughters' lives and many other great-grandchildren here and around the country. Very few great-grandchildren have the fortune of knowing their great-grandparents, and even fewer have the fortune of knowing someone so loving as Millie. Lastly, I just want to thank Joey. I think it was your love, your companionship, and your care that really enabled her to be part of our life for so long. I want to thank you for that on behalf of the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren who had the rare fortune of knowing someone like Millie. I think that spirit of taking care of her just came from Millie, because I can't think of anyone else who really demonstrates kind of the love and the commitment to family. So clearly, it's rubbed off on you. So thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone here for coming today. Our family really appreciates your being here. My remarks will be concise, but hopefully to the point. So I looked up the words mom and mother in the dictionary. A mother is defined as the woman in your life who will help raise you and love you unconditionally, forever and always. This was immediately followed by a mom or mother endures the good or the bad from her children and always hands out kisses, hugs, and love. Well, Mom, you knocked it out of the park, and I thank you so very much. When it came to loyalty and support for her children, I saw from our mom nothing less than an unyielding commitment and belief. When it came to guidance, our mom was spot on with her insight. When you needed a pick-me-up for any reason at all, our mom was there for us forever and always. Despite her passing, I know my mom lives on in me, as her impact on my life is immeasurable and enduring. How rich and fortunate my life has been, having you as my mom. Again, thank you so very much for everything you have done for me and shown me. I will miss you very, very much.
I too want to thank everyone for being here. Our family is just so thrilled that so many of you are here, so many of you we haven't seen in such a long time, family and friends who've come from all over. So my mom is someone who had an amazing personality. If you asked her how tall she was, she would promptly say, "My doctor says I'm 5'7", even though we knew she stood 4'10". When my mom was a little girl, she sat around the dining room table, and with only 3 of them there, she said, "This just doesn't seem right. It seems awkward to only have 3 people at a dining room table for a holiday." So she said, "When I grow up, I will be sure that I have a big family to fill up the dining room table at holidays." And now there are 30 of us. She lived to 4 generations to see 30 members of her family. We have a lot of nicknames in our household. So my mom's favorite nickname that my dad called her was Malka. Malka means queen in Hebrew. So we all felt that my mom indeed was a queen. She had many, many other nicknames, which include Malkovich, Millie, Mill, Miller, Mild Red, to her kids known as Mom, Mama, Mommy, to her grandchildren, Nana, Grandma, and to her great-grandchildren, Nana and Gigi. One quick story is that a few days ago, I was sitting in my mom's backyard, and in fact, it happened to be the sundown before she passed. And I was reflecting on things. It just so happens that when my dad wrote his book, First Man, Then Adam, about Adam and Eve, the cover of that book, when published by Simon & Schuster, had the blackness of the universe and a big red shiny apple in the middle of it. And as I sat that evening in my parents' backyard, something caught my eye around the corner. So I walked around the corner and suddenly saw a big apple tree that I never realized my dad had planted. And wouldn't you know it, there were apples growing on the tree, which is quite remarkable because where we live in Castilla, California, you can grow oranges, you can grow lemons, but not apples. And yet, there were apples growing on the tree, big, shiny, red apples. So I counted them, and there were 30 apples for each one of us. My mom was very, very proud of her family. But actually, for her 99 and a half years, we're all very, very proud of her. I love you, Mommy, and I'll miss you forever and always.
Thank you. Our loved ones leave us signs all the time. I always tell people to look for those signs because they're everywhere. We just have to see them. We have to open our ears and our eyes and notice. Time for me to go now. I won't say goodbye. Look for me in rainbows way up in the sky. In the morning sunrise when all the world is new, just look for me and love me, as you know I loved you. Time for me to leave you. I won't say goodbye. Look for me in rainbows high up in the sky. In the evening sunset, when all the world is through, just look for me and love me, and I'll be close to you. Time for us to part now. We won't say goodbye. Look for me in rainbows, shining in the sky. Every waking moment and all your whole life through, just look for me and love me, as you know I loved you. Just wish me to be near you, and I'll be there with you. Again, thank you all for coming. We will end this part of our service with the chanting of the El Male Rachamim. We will complete our service at the cemetery with the recitation of the Kaddish. So I invite you all to stand in respect now, if you're able, as I chant the El Male, and then I will translate it, and we will make our way to the cemetery. Il Male Rachamim, Shochein Bam Ramim, Hamitzei Menucha Nochana Tachat Kanfei, Ashechinah, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia, Mazhirim. Et Nishmat Shehalcha Leo Lama, Baal Harachamim, Yastireha B'Seter Kenafav Leolamim, Vitzror HaChaim et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant perfect rest on the wings of your divine presence in the lofty heights of the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the heavens, to the soul of Millie, who has gone to her eternal rest, as all her family and friends pray for the elevation of her soul. Her resting place shall be in the Garden of Eden with the apples. Therefore, the God of mercy will care for her under the protection of God's wings for all time, and bind her soul in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance, and she will rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at West Lawn Cemetery, located at 7801 West Montrose in Norridge. Following the service, everyone is invited to Moretti's restaurant. It is in Rosemont. That information is on the service folder, as well as memorial contribution information to Hadassah Chicago North Shore chapter. For those of you who are joining us online, all that information is on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. Please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak on your cellular phone while driving to a cemetery, and please don't text. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place. For those people that have been asked to serve as pallbearers, please stand next to Mrs. Ginsburg's casket.